It's just a flesh wound. The Black Knight, defiantly bleeding from all limbs. Monty Python and the Holy Grail wasn't just a parody. It was a cinematic revolution wrapped in chainmail absurdity. On the surface, it looked like a bunch of British comedians swinging fake swords in the woods. But behind the scenes, it was chaos. Real injuries, financial sabotage, censorship wars, and a homemade castle made of cardboard. Today, we're diving into 20 weird facts you didn't know about Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the low-budget, high-insanity comedy that rewrote the rules of spoof filmmaking. And trust us, the bonus fact at the end? It involves real excrement and royal approval. You don't want to miss it. Now, saddle up your coconuts and gallop into the madness. 1. The knights didn't ride horses because they were broke. Believe it or not, the most iconic gag in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the knights miming horseback riding while banging coconuts, was born out of desperation. The production had such a tiny budget that they couldn't afford actual horses. So rather than cut those scenes, the Pythons leaned into the absurd and made it part of the film's charm. The coconut clopping was added later in post-production and became one of the most recognizable sound effects in comedy history. The bit was so effective, it seemed intentional, turning poverty into brilliance. Fans now quote the coconut scene as if it were genius writing all along. But it was simply a clever solution to a financial problem. That's Monty Python magic. They took limitation and turned it into legend. 2. They only had access to one real castle. Despite being a medieval adventure, Holy Grail had almost no access to authentic castles. The crew originally planned to shoot in several historic Scottish castles, but the National Trust pulled out at the last minute, citing the film's silly script. With no backup plan, the crew had to film nearly every castle scene at just one location, Doune Castle. Through creative camera angles, redressed sets, and clever editing, they made it look like multiple unique fortresses. At one point, Doune Castle even plays 2 different locations in the same scene. The team also built cheap plywood facades to mimic castle gates in wide shots. Watching the film now, it's hard to believe it was shot mostly at one site, but that's a testament to the Python's resourcefulness and Terry Gilliam's surreal eye for visual trickery. 3. The film was funded by rock bands major film studios refused to back the project, calling it too British and too weird. So the Pythons turned to an unexpected source, 1970s rock royalty. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and Genesis chipped in tens of thousands of pounds to get the film made. Why? Because they needed tax write-offs. At the time, British tax laws allowed wealthy musicians to claim film investments as deductions. Led Zeppelin alone contributed £31,500, which was a huge chunk of the budget. It's bizarre to think that a film about fart jokes and killer rabbits exists today because of Stairway to Heaven. Without these music legends footing the bill, Monty Python and the Holy Grail might never have made it past the concept stage. That's right, your favorite scene exists because Pink Floyd didn't want to pay taxes. The Black Knight scene was done with DIY gore effects. The infamous scene where King Arthur fights the Black Knight and chops off all his limbs might look gruesome, but it was pure DIY horror comedy. The crew used primitive prosthetics, fake blood tubes, and off-screen actors holding detached limbs to create the illusion. When the knight's arms get chopped off, a one-armed actor was used for close-ups. For the leg amputations, a hole was dug into the ground and the actor crouched inside it, wearing a fake upper torso. The blood was made from red syrup and food coloring, and it gushed uncontrollably thanks to a pressurized pump system. It all cost just a few pounds, but visually, it became one of the most iconic scenes in comedy history. What was meant to look horrific ended up being so over the top. It transformed gore into laughter. Extras were literally picked up off the street. With little budget for casting, the Pythons improvised by grabbing locals to play peasants, villagers, and background characters. In fact, many extras were simply tourists visiting Scotland who got roped into filming. Others were members of the crew dressed in makeshift costumes, including cinematographer Terry Bedford, who appeared in at least 3 scenes as different villagers. The costuming department would grab whatever rags were lying around to dress these spontaneous extras. If you look closely, you'll notice some of the villagers reappear throughout the film, because they're the same person in different outfits. One of the kids seen throwing a cow dung ball? He was a friend of Michael Palin's nephew. It was guerrilla filmmaking at its finest, and the result only made.
2. The Texas Wheelers. With Jack Elam and a young Mark Hamill, the Texas Wheelers had grit, heart, and humor wrapped in the rugged charm of a backwoods family. Elam played a deadbeat dad trying to reconnect with his children in the wake of their mother's death, and the emotional depth ran deeper than most sitcoms dared to go. Unfortunately, ABC buried it in a terrible time slot, and it was yanked off the air after just 4 episodes. But critics praised its mix of gruff honesty and sharp wit, and viewers who caught it never forgot it. It was ahead of its time, balancing laughs with real life in a way modern dramedies now emulate. With stronger network support, it could have matured into something groundbreaking. 3. Hot L Baltimore. Norman Lear took a big swing with this bold and controversial sitcom based on Lanford Wilson's stage play. Set in a rundown hotel filled with misfits and lost souls, Hot L Baltimore featured taboo subjects and marginalized characters rarely seen on network TV. It was the first show to feature a gay couple as recurring characters, and the ensemble cast delivered fearless performances. But the network grew uneasy with its raw themes, and the show was canceled after 13 episodes. Lear was building something special, a slice-of-life sitcom that confronted reality instead of escaping it. In hindsight, it was simply too real for its era. With today's appetite for inclusive, character-driven comedy, a second season could have proven it was just ahead of its time. 4. Dusty's Trail. Essentially, Gilligan's Island in the Wild West, Dusty's Trail starred Bob Denver as the bumbling sidekick on a wagon train lost in the wilderness. It was created by Sherwood Schwartz, the same mind behind Gilligan's Island, and followed a nearly identical formula: zany characters stuck in misadventure. While critics rolled their eyes at the concept, kids and families tuned in weekly for the slapstick antics and frontier chaos. It lasted only 1 season, but it had the kind of lighthearted charm Saturday evenings were made for. Denver's comedic timing and the ensemble's chemistry made it a comfort show with tons of potential. It didn't need reinvention, just more time to settle into its groove. 5. On the Rocks airing as the edgy companion to Barney Miller, this prison-set sitcom tackled life behind bars with unexpected warmth and wit. Adapted from the British series Porridge, it followed 3 inmates navigating prison routines with sarcasm, solidarity, and surprising insight. The cast was fantastic, especially Hal Williams, and the writing managed to make institutional life feel strangely relatable. While critics appreciated its boldness, it struggled to find an audience and was shelved after 23 episodes. But with social commentary, working-class grit, and rich character dynamics, it was ripe for expansion. In the age of prestige TV, On the Rocks would have been retooled as a breakout hit. 6. Karen was CBS's attempt to mix political satire with light-hearted charm, and it starred Karen Valentine as a spunky young staffer at a consumer protection agency. With her natural charisma and relatable warmth, Valentine brought a glow to every scene, balancing naivety with determined spirit. The show was quirky, socially conscious, and gave women a rare lead role in a politically themed comedy. But despite its timely premise and well-meaning humor, it struggled with ratings and was gone after 13 episodes. Still, its potential was unmistakable. In an era craving representation and social relevance, Karen was just warming up to something meaningful. With today's hunger for smart female-led workplace comedies, this one could have had legs, if only it had time. 7. The Montefuscos. NBC's The Montefuscos was a slice-of-life sitcom about a large Italian-American family in New Haven, Connecticut. Airing just once a week, it packed the energy of a Sunday dinner into 30 minutes, complete with banter, misunderstandings, and heartfelt hugs. Critics dismissed it as too derivative of All in the Family or The Waltons, but it was actually a breath of fresh air. The show celebrated family tradition, generational conflict, and cultural pride in a way that felt authentic. But it barely lasted 8 episodes before NBC pulled the plug. It deserved more time to connect with audiences, especially those who saw themselves in its boisterous dinner table arguments. Had it aired in a different slot, The Montefuscos might have become a beloved family staple. 8. Big Eddie. Big Eddie was an offbeat sitcom about a reformed mobster, played by Sheldon Leonard, trying to go straight and raise his granddaughter in a respectable life. Set in New York and filled with streetwise wit, the show had an unusual mix of toughness and tenderness. Leonard, a longtime Hollywood tough guy, brought surprising heart to the role, while critics were unsure what to make of it.
Knee! His costume changes were often rapid, sometimes taking place behind trees or inside makeshift tents between takes. What's wild is how few people noticed at the time, thanks to clever wigs, fake beards, and outrageous accents. Cleese himself found the constant changing exhausting but hilarious, especially during long outdoor shoots in unpredictable Scottish weather. The Monty Python philosophy was simple. If you can't afford more actors, become them yourself. Cleese's shape-shifting performances prove that in comedy, versatility is often more valuable than budget. 12. Eric Idle's drunken song scene was filmed with real booze. The scene featuring Eric Idle as the singing, boozy, brave Sir Robin's minstrel was filmed late one cold evening when the cast was particularly miserable. To warm up, Idle reportedly had a few drinks. Okay, several. When it came time to shoot, the slurred delivery and wobbly performance weren't entirely acting. Idle has since admitted that much of the song was improvised in his tipsy state, and the drunkenness added to the minstrel's over-the-top bravery ballads. The crew loved it so much, they kept it in. The result? A legendary comedic moment created by accident and alcohol. Monty Python often blurred the line between character and chaos, and this is one scene where the real-life mess made the fantasy funnier. Just don't try this at home or on a film set, unless you're Eric Idle. 13. They couldn't afford chainmail, so they knitted it all that armor you see in the movie. Not metal, not even plastic. It's yarn. The crew couldn't afford real chainmail for the night's costumes, so they asked costume designer Hazel Pethig to create something that looked like metal but didn't cost like metal. Her solution: knitting silver gray wool into interlocking loops to mimic chainmail texture. When viewed from a distance and shot through a slightly grainy film stock, it looked convincing enough. But up close, the actors looked like they were wearing sparkly sweaters. The cast reportedly hated the itchy, sweaty male, especially during action scenes. Some complained it soaked up rainwater and made them feel like wet sheep. Still, the fake armor is now legendary, and one of the original knitted chainmail hoods is housed in the British Film Institute's archives as a piece of movie history. 14. They got in trouble with the church. Again, religious groups weren't happy with Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But this was nothing new for the comedy team. Even though the film didn't directly mock religion as overtly as Life of Brian, scenes like the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch and the God animation were seen as sacrilegious by some conservative groups. The scene where God appears as a cartoon and tells Arthur to get on with it, particularly ruffled feathers. In fact, some local councils in the UK banned screenings altogether, citing it as mocking sacred history. Ironically, the animation of God used a real 15th century painting, adding art history to the offense. The Pythons brushed it off, with Michael Palin joking that it's hard to blaspheme against a character who looks like he's stuck in a Monty Python cartoon. Critics may have been outraged, but audiences howled with laughter. 15. The French taunting scene was almost cut for being too stupid. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries. It's one of the most quoted lines in comedy, but it almost didn't happen. When the scene was being written, some of the Python team felt the over-the-top insults were just too silly, even for us. They worried that breaking the fourth wall with such blatant absurdity might derail the movie's tone. But John Cleese pushed to keep it, arguing that the escalating ridiculousness was exactly what made it funny. During filming, Cleese improvised many of the lines, riffing for nearly 10 minutes while the crew laughed off camera. Eventually, only the best burns made the final cut. Today, it's considered a comedic masterclass in nonsense. It also marked a shift in how screenwriters viewed insult comedy, proving that the more surreal the taunt, the longer it sticks in pop culture memory. 16. The Queen was a secret fan of the film Yes. You read that correctly. Monty Python and the Holy Grail had royal admirers. According to Michael Palin, a friend of the royal household once let slip that Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Charles had watched the film and loved it. It became a low-key favorite in the royal cinema rotation. Apparently, the Queen particularly enjoyed the scenes with the killer rabbit and the absurdly long-winded castle guard. While the monarchy never officially endorsed it, the idea of British royalty giggling at a man shouting, "It's just a flesh wound," makes the whole thing even more surreal. Prince William later confirmed in an interview that he too was a fan. It's ironic a movie full of mockery toward monarchy, nobility, and medieval authority turned out to.
The absurdities of daily life from the other side. But after just 7 episodes, the network pulled the plug. Maybe audiences weren't ready for a body swap sitcom in prime time, but it had real potential. With better timing and marketing, Turnabout could have been a conversation-starting classic. Today's audiences would eat up its progressive premise. It was ahead of its time, and television let it down. 15. The Betty White Show. Starring the legendary Betty White as Joyce Whitman, a fading actress starring in a low-budget cop show, this sitcom delivered meta humor and behind-the-scenes Hollywood absurdity long before it was trendy. It reunited White with Mary Tyler Moore Show, Alums, and had sharp writing, great timing, and White's unmatched comedic flair. But CBS shuffled its schedule and gave it little support. Only 14 episodes aired before it was quietly canceled. That's a shame because it showcased Betty White at her best, bold, sassy, and hilariously self-aware. Had it been given time, The Betty White Show might have become a cult favorite or even reinvented how we viewed showbiz comedies. It deserved a longer life, just like the icon herself. 16. The Kallikaks. The Kallikaks was a bold satire about a family of schemers living near the Grand Canyon and trying to get rich through increasingly harebrained scams. With a tone that leaned into mischief and absurdity, it starred David Huddleston as the gruff but lovable patriarch who ran a gas station with his eccentric kin. Audiences were unsure whether to root for them or laugh at them, and that moral ambiguity made it fascinating. But with only 5 episodes aired before its cancellation, the show never found its audience. It had the bones of a cult classic, offbeat, a little wild, and unapologetically different. Had it been given time to develop, the Kallikaks might have become the 70s answer to My Name is Earl. Its world was weird, but its heart was real. 17. Faye. Starring Lee Grant as a newly divorced woman rebuilding her life in her 40s, Faye was groundbreaking for its honest portrayal of single adulthood and female empowerment. In an era when divorce was still taboo in pop culture, Faye tackled real issues with humor and dignity. Grant was mesmerizing, smart, vulnerable, and fiercely independent. The show earned critical acclaim and even an Emmy nod, but NBC canceled it after just 10 episodes. Why? Some say it was too real, too fast for a network still clinging to outdated norms. But in hindsight, Faye was ahead of its time, paving the way for future dramedies about women finding themselves later in life. It deserved more than a single season. It deserved a movement. 18. The New Temperature's Rising Show. A retooling of a prior sitcom, this hospital comedy starred Cleveland Little and later Paul Lynde, mixing zany slapstick with sharp social jabs. Set in a dysfunctional hospital, it balanced biting satire and absurd humor long before Scrubs or Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Unfortunately, it was plagued by constant cast changes and rebranding efforts. Audiences couldn't keep up, and neither could the ratings. But the premise had so much to offer, a surreal take on medical life, led by magnetic comedic talent. It was a victim of its own identity crisis. A stable cast and consistent vision could have turned The New Temperature's Rising Show into a trend-setting success. It was almost brilliant, and that's the tragedy. 19. I'm a Big Girl Now. Okay, sneaking just over the 1970s edge, I'm a Big Girl Now starred Diana Canova and Danny Thomas in a warm-hearted generational sitcom. Canova played a newly divorced single mom moving back in with her old-fashioned father, and the show explored parenting, independence, and shifting gender roles. It had a perfect blend of sass and sentimentality. Danny Thomas brought his classic charm, while Canova radiated modern confidence. The show had solid ratings and great chemistry, but ABC pulled it after just 1 season, fearing audience drop-off. In truth, it was a sitcom about evolving family dynamics long before that became TV's bread and butter. A second season could have built something truly special. It still lingers in the memory of those who gave it a chance. Chapter 20th. Melvin and Howard. Based on the quirky true story that inspired the Oscar-winning film, Melvin and Howard got a pilot, but never a full season. It followed Melvin Dummer, a gas station attendant who claimed to have picked up billionaire Howard Hughes and later appeared in The Eccentric's Will. The show leaned into that working-class whimsy and American dream absurdity that made the movie so compelling. It had humor, heart, and a slice-of-life flavor that was rare in sitcoms, but it wasn't picked up for a series, perhaps seen as too niche. Still, the idea was gold, blending real-life weirdness with everyday struggles. Melvin and Howard had the makings of a cult darling, and it's a shame we never saw how the full